Welcome to Your Money Story. I'm your host, Renita Young, and today we're closing out our series on love and money, asking, are you in a financially compatible relationship? Has that ever been a concern for you? And I have a guest coming on today who says that it should be a concern. In fact, she called off her wedding 6 weeks to the date because she and her fiance were not financially compatible. I'm talking about Leah Marie Collins, and she's a millennial money mentor, and she comes from Texas. I'm about to go grab her right now. Hang on. Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. Can you do me a favor and turn your camera perpendicular to where it is now?
Yes.
Thank you.
Is this better?
Yes, this is perfect. Thank you so much for joining me, Leah. How is it going in the South this morning?
It's going well. Cold, rainy, windy.
Okay, but what's cold in Texas is definitely not cold here in New York City.
That's true. It's cold for me.
Nevertheless, it is cold. I spent a couple years in the South, so you're right, it is cold. But thank you for joining me today. We know you're here from Dallas. And first, I want to start out talking about your relationship with money. You're also from the Dallas area, and how your story really was highlighted to me was because you called off your wedding because you and your fiance were incompatible financially. But before we get to that, tell me, what was your relationship like with money growing up?
Okay. So I grew up in a two-parent household. For the most part, both of my parents worked the majority of my life. We were definitely earlier in my childhood, we were lower middle class, and then eventually we were middle class. There was always a strong focus on education, getting a good job after you graduated. We were not allowed to have more than one B on our report card. If we didn't have straight A's, there was going to be a conversation. Um, Both of my parents instilled a very strong work ethic in us. We were taught to work hard, pay your bills, have a little money set aside for a rainy day, and pay what you owe, which basically means have good credit.
Okay.
But one experience that really shaped the way I look at money happened when I was in about, I think it was second grade, and we were going back to school. All the kids have new school clothes, and I wanted new school
Yeah.
clothes. And I asked my mother for some, and she said we couldn't afford it. So of course, I
Mm.
wanted to know why. So she sits me down and she shows me the family budget. At that time, I think only my father was working. And she shows me how much he makes and then the expenses that they have to
Wow.
pay. And at the end of the month, there was about $20 left. And I remember being terrified. I thought we were going to be homeless and
Wow.
crying. And I
And
made
you
a
were in
decision.
second grade.
Yeah,
What
yeah. I was
education at
like
second?
7 or 8 years old.
Wow.
Yes. And I made a decision that day that I would never, I would make it I would try my hardest to make it to where I would never have to live paycheck to paycheck. So I'm very glad that my mom taught me that lesson early on. I know that's not what she was trying to do, but that's what I got out of it.
What an amazing, I mean, that probably stayed in the back of your mind while you were shopping for school pictures, while you were, thinking
Yeah.
about prom, and really helped your decision making from the start. I love that story. Thank you for sharing it. And so we get to the more recent story, which is the unfortunate breakup, which first, I'm sorry that you had to cancel your wedding. That can't be easy for anyone to do. But tell me what led to this decision to cancel it because you guys were financially incompatible.
Okay. Well, one thing that I would definitely recommend to people is to go to premarital counseling before you get engaged. So we went,
Mm-hmm.
but we were already engaged. And the issue with that is usually when people are already engaged, they're less likely to take an in-depth look at their finances
Hmm.
and other potential areas of conflict. Studies have shown that because, for one, you've already paid money on the ring, you booked the photographer, you booked the venue. We had spent $40,000 by the
Wow.
time we canceled our wedding. And then there's the social stigma behind it, right? It's embarrassing. You don't want to tell people. So at that point, you're ignoring red flags, you're ignoring character flaws just so you can push forward and get married, right? So that's what we were doing. But eventually, it just got to a point where we realized it wasn't going to work. And the issue with one of the other issues is we have been together for a very long time. And we made a lot of assumptions based on how things were managed while we were dating. We thought it would continue that way when we were married. But he had different expectations. I had different expectations, and we didn't discuss those. Another issue was cultural expectations. And that's one thing I didn't see in premarital counseling.
Yeah, dig into that because that's important.
Yes. So he was Nigerian American. I'm like Black African American. And there are a lot of similarities, but there are a lot of huge differences between the cultures. And that played a major, major factor in why we ended up calling off the wedding as well. And with the rise, I'm sorry?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying with the rise in interracial relationships or people marrying outside of their culture or their religion, I just think it's very important to discuss those different expectations going in.
You know what I found really interesting on your Instagram page? You talked about the difference between collectivism versus individualism, right? So can you explain that for people and how it kind of plays out in romantic relationships?
Okay. So America is more of an individualistic culture. It's more about the person. It's more about self-sufficiency. You kind of make decisions on your own. Collectivist culture is more of the whole community. An example is when we would have certain issues in our relationship, I just want to talk about it between me and him. But he wants to bring, the mothers in, the aunties, things like that. I'm like, what are we doing?
Okay.
But when it comes to money, for example, I help my parents out if they need it, but for the most part, they're retired. They've set money aside for that. Whereas a lot of different cultures, they are 100% like funding their parents. They send money back to Mexico or Nigeria, like different immigrants. A lot of times that's what they do. So that is the potential, to cause conflict because a lot of their parents maybe don't have, savings or they depend on their kids to support them in retirement because that's what they did for their parents.
Right. That's what seems like a generational thing in a lot of different cultures. And so if I were to move a little bit from that, thanks for explaining those too, because there are also very important distinctions there. Talk about how early you should have those money discussions, right? So before you get engaged, how soon should you have the discussion about money?
I would say have those discussions as soon as possible. Now, while it may be convenient to have them up front during the first date, let's be real, that's going to scare a lot of people off and it can send the wrong signals. But there are subtle ways to have that discussion, right? So say you're on a date and things are going well and your date wants to see you next weekend and ask what you're doing. So you can say something like, if it's true, you can say something like, oh, I'll be with my realtor looking for homes. Then naturally the conversation is going to turn into the current state of the economy, home ownership, things of that nature. Maybe they'll tell about their current situation. Or you can talk about a vacation you're going on that you're saving up for. Or perhaps you are looking for another job and you just got a job offer and you're negotiating the salary. Maybe you can ask them for tips. Basically, it just gives you a way to gauge their money mindset. And what a money mindset is your beliefs and your behavior behind money. And it drives our financial decisions that we make every day. So
those are nice, subtle ways to bring it up in a conversation.
Yeah. One thing I do, people think is weird, but if someone else is paying, I see if they tip. Like just little things like that. They tip.
Okay. Well, no, that also shows the kindness factor. In the person and maybe what they're willing to give beyond what they're required to give perhaps. And so you also talk about how it's important to discuss financial goals to find out if you are financially compatible. What kind of financial goals are you talking about? You talking about buying a home someday or maybe even saving a certain amount for something else?
Right. So when it comes to goal setting, one thing that I want to make clear is it's okay to have individual goals and shared goals. The issue comes in when those goals clash. For example, one person wants to live frugally and retire early, and the other one lives a YOLO, you only live once lifestyle and doesn't care about retirement. Or
Okay.
one partner wants to leave their 9 to 5 and pursue entrepreneurship 100%, and the other partner is like, no, I need you to keep the stable job with benefits.
Mm-hmm.
That's when it becomes an issue. But if you
Okay.
one partner may have an individual goal of just improving their credit or doing a no spend challenge, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
But the key is addressing those conflicts when they arise or before they arise. And then also just having shared goals together, right? So just sitting down and coming up with a plan for your family, and the bond and the financial intimacy that's developed when you're planning your future and your vision together is like none other. And then in addition to just planning your money goals, you're also improving your communication and your trust as well.
Sounds good. And that is before you get engaged, right? And after and all throughout your
Yes,
marriage, obviously, yes?
absolutely. It doesn't stop.
Okay.
You
It does
continue
not
to do
stop.
that with the
You hear
relationship.
that, folks? The communication about
Yes,
your finances does not stop. It
yes,
starts before you get engaged, though, right, Leah?
exactly.
Okay. And so discuss this separate accounts versus joint accounts thing. Does it really matter?
It really depends on the relationship. So I have some clients where they prefer to have separate accounts and they just pay the bills 50-50. And that works for them. The problem with that though is if one person makes significantly more than the other, it can
Mm-hmm.
be an issue. So say one person makes 200,000 and the other one makes 50,000 and they're splitting the bills in half. A
Mm-hmm.
significant portion of that person that's making 50,000, a significant portion of their check is going to be taken up by those expenses, where the
Mm-hmm.
person who makes 200,000, that's nothing to them. So that can
Right.
end up causing resentment. Some couples are okay with just having one joint account and putting 100% of their income, their paycheck in both. That works for some people. The issue with that can arise if there's financial infidelity. And what financial infidelity is when people start lying about how they spend money. So maybe one
Mm-hmm.
person really have a gambling addiction and they gamble all that money away. There's no other money. No one had a separate account
Yeah.
set aside. What I
That
find
would
works
be tough.
best. I'm sorry.
I just said that would be tough.
Yeah, yeah, and I've seen that. What typically works best is a hybrid of both. So both partners have their own separate account and they have a joint account for household expenses, which is a checking
Mm-hmm.
account. And sometimes they'll have a joint savings account as well. And how that works is basically you pay what you bring in. So partner A makes $60,000, partner B makes $40,000. Partner A is going to pay 60% of the bills, and partner B is going to pay 40% of the bills. And typically
Okay.
that's the model that I see that works best for couples.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. So not necessarily split it down the middle according to what you do, what you make.
Right.
And in all this, what I'm hearing is learn how to communicate, be
Exactly.
transparent with your money situation, right? And so
Exactly.
you help people do this with your coaching program, or is it? It's actually group coaching, correct? Can you
Yes.
tell me about it and how does it work? Because I find it interesting that you also suggest doing this before marriage and before engagement. So tell me how the program works.
Okay. So previously, I was just working one on one with clients, but what I found in a group setting is that oftentimes people end up mentoring each other. It helps when you see other people who are going through something similar. You realize, oh, my spouse, maybe they're not crazy. Maybe this is just something, that people do in general. So when I went through premarital counseling, there were certain gaps that I noticed. One was the cultural expectations. We didn't touch on that. And then I shopped around for different courses that would, different workbooks, books. I couldn't find anything. And the other was the financial aspect. Most of the courses and most of the books had 1 or 2 pages, and they were very high level. It wasn't very helpful. So
Okay.
those are two things that I focus on in my upcoming group coaching program that's going to launch in January 2022.
Okay. And congratulations on that launch. I see a few
Mhm.
people down here kind of group coaching each other
Right,
with
exactly.
comments.
Okay.
A lot of times people do. They come on here and they give very helpful comments to one another about this. A couple of folks just saying that they enjoy the conversation and that they promote joint accounts. That's good if it works for you, but it
Right.
does not work for everybody. And you know what? I think we'll wrap up here with this last question. A lot of people have their why for personal finance, for having a budget, for having a future budget, you know. And so your why, I mean, it didn't completely come out of a place for pain, but your current focus came out of a really sensitive place, sensitive, vulnerable place for you. So tell me, what's your why as to why you chose to expose this to the world and help people out this way?
My why is because I don't want other people to be in the situation that I was in. It was very difficult to walk away. We had been together for a very long time. It was very difficult to walk away from that. But if you can, it's easy to avoid that mistake by having those conversations early, right? So that's my why. I want people to be married or to be in long-term relationships, to be happy, to build generational wealth. And if I can assist in doing that, then I would love to do so.
All right. I think that's a great place to leave it. Leah, thank you so much for joining me. And folks, if you want to learn more about Leah's coaching program or her content, which some of it is hilarious on your IG page, go over to the Leah Marie Collins on IG Live, and you can get links to all of her different avenues there. But until next time, thank you guys so much for joining. I'm Renita Young. You have one more thing?
Yeah, I
Okay,
also
go
have a
ahead.
financial compatibility quiz. The link is in my bio. So if you're
Oh.
considering getting engaged, or doing something long term with someone, maybe take this quiz. Both partners can take the quiz to see if you're financially compatible.
That's a good resource. Thank you for adding that. All
No
right.
problem.
All right, folks, hop on over to the page. I might try it out as well. Have a lovely day, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.